Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Monday, April 27th, 2026, and today we're squashing protecting gardens from erosion while establishing beds, and is electrical conductivity relevant to gardeners? So let's do it. Conductivity. It's weird. You'd think you'd use it like every day. All right, happy Monday, everyone. I hope your weekends were as lovely as can be. For us, it was lots of soccer, as it often is, and as it often should be. Plus, we had the older child in a play, which children's theater is the best. That was a lot of fun and a lot of work for that particular child. And yeah, they just were amazing. It was super fun. And I had a tree fall across our driveway. Weirdly, the timing couldn't have been more perfect on this, as on Friday, I was listening to the most recent Radio Lab episode about tree canopies, and in particular, all the soil that forms atop the trees, like in the crevices and stuff from, animal droppings and trees falling and all that stuff, which is interesting on its own. But then there's all this life that like lives up there off of that soil or whatever. And some animals, in fact, that never touch the ground, or at least our ground, and plants and all sorts of stuff. And I may do a whole segment on that topic later because it is super fascinating. So definitely take some time today and just listen to that shorter Radio Lab episode today if you can. Anyway, this tree, or the part of the tree that fell, it fell because the inside had rotted out, and there inside of that, crevice was all this rich soil plus all these like germinating little plants in it. So that stuff is super cool to me. But again, maybe more on that another time, but let me know what cool things you all know about canopies. I'm very fascinated. For now though, don't forget to send in your 20-second farm video clips to farmermike@no-tillgrowers.com so we can feature them here. Love seeing those. Just upload it to Google Drive or Dropbox or whatever and share it with Mike. Love seeing those gardens, especially in the spring, but all year long is good by me. All right, so it is Monday, where every week this year we are digging into a single less talked about crop in a series we're calling Planting and Raving, or at least I'm calling it that. Today, the crop we're going to cover is summer squash. I think I've done a summer squash segment or two before, but it's been a bit, and I thought I would try to bring some new thoughts and insights to the subject, or at least give it a shot. First, I love squash. I really enjoy yellow squash and zucchini in general, just eating-wise, which I'm going to group those two crops together here, largely because I really love rice mixed with whatever we have coming out of the garden, especially squashes. Mike and I often joke about starting a food truck just called Rice And, that's the name of it, Rice And, where you get a bowl of rice and your choice of any number of seasonal, like curries or stews or veggies, etc., and which would no doubt feature a lot of squash. However, I know that mostly because of pests, summer squash isn't always fruitful for everyone. So what I'll do today is talk a bit about varieties in this first segment. Then in segment 3, we will get down to planting and protecting the squash. All right, so summer squash comes in many different shapes and sizes and colors: green squashes, golden zucchinis, yellow squashes with green tips, patty pans, straight squash, curved squash, ball shaped, and everything in between. If I had a bigger market for all of these squashes, I would grow every last one of them. One, because the squash plant is among my favorites just to look at, and two, because squash is delicious and prolific. Now, that doesn't mean it's incredibly profitable, which we will talk a bit about, but it is prolific, and it can be a great and consistent crop in the right conditions, like what Mikey and Kez do down there in Australia, where they grow a lot of zucchini, and you can just pack it right in there in the field and move it to the customers immediately. So obviously, if you're a backyard grower, trying a few different varieties and finding the ones that, work best for you in terms of flavor, but also in terms of, being suitable for your garden and context is going to be key. For the market gardener, that's obviously also key, but you've got to additionally factor in that yield and time to maturity, pest resistance, etc. The yellow squash that has been at the top of my list these last few years, or really probably like almost a decade now, is without a doubt the multi-pick variety from Johnny's. I've not had a lot of success with selling patty pans or anything else, kind of off the beaten path, at least not at market. So this little smooth yellow squash picked young when it's very tender has been a huge hit for us, and it's just super prolific and delicious. I've grown various crooknecks over the years and kind of those more like knobbly ones. Is that a word? Yeah, knobbly. So don't get me wrong, there are a lot of good productive squashes out there. I just really love this particular variety, the multi-pick, and it's sort of like a waxy, attractive look. But you all make sure to shout out your favorites and maybe even your growing region. Me, Zone 6B, Kentucky, like that. Now, on the Zooks side of things, I have had really good luck growing some boring classics like Black Beauty, just a really nice workhorse for a zucchini. I've also had really nice experiences growing the golden zucchinis, but it's definitely more of a specialty item. The average customer wants their Zooks green and their squashes yellow, but but that doesn't mean they won't try something new. And I really liked the flavor of those golden zucchinis, that they were actually pretty tasty. A CSA is also always a good way to move off, those off the beaten path sort of crops or varieties. Don't overload people with squash if you're selling it or doing it in a CSA. I have 2 weeks off and 2 weeks on rule for squashes in a CSA, where you give it for 2 weeks and then you give customers 2 weeks off of that particular squash, which is nice when you have a farmer's market to have that other outlet for the squash. But yes, don't overload people on squash. It's helpful in a CSA, but it can also hurt you. People at the end of the season may be like, that was just a lot of squash. Now, I will get to the planting and harvesting and storing in the third segment, but if you have trouble with certain pathogens like cucumber mosaic virus, papaya ring spot virus, powdery mildew, watermelon mosaic virus, or zucchini yellow mosaic virus, there are seeds that are resistant to those and maybe to others. So seek those out. In terms of marketing, summer squash do really well at market really early. If you can beat, the other growers to market with squash, it will fly. If not, it will rot. I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it kind of works. Squash is one of those crops that customers often want once or twice, and then they're good. I often say that around mid-June, I will just pull the plants out if they're still producing, because it just, it's just going to waste. I mean, by waste, I mean compost. And the donation places can only handle so much summer squash, because that is everybody's story. That usually works out though, because if I've done my job well, they've been producing for several weeks by mid-June. Then when people start to come in, I can pull those plants out and put something else there, and then come back with squash later in the summer. Squash will produce for about 8 weeks or more, depending on the fertility, variety, etc. It's not a super profitable crop, and yield will depend heavily on when you harvest it, but it can be quite prolific. And if you are able to take some of the male flowers for squash blossoms, and in fact, there are varieties that produce extra squash blossoms, if that's your thing, that is a nice bonus crop that can up its earning potential of the average squash plant. For us, it's a pick everyday crop while it's producing, which is not easy to do, but that way we are not getting overly mature squashes. We will even pick it on weekends. It is my least favorite thing that we do on weekends, but it does keep it producing and we get all those nice squash. More on harvesting and such in the third segment. For now though, a quick break, and then gardening to electrical conductivity boogaloo, BRB. I gotta stop doing this. I feel like it makes a sound. Anyway, doesn't mean I'm going to. Today's episode is brought to you by Grown By. Grow smarter with Grown By, the farmer-owned cooperative. Grown By is the platform for online sales of everything: custom and traditional CSAs, halves of beef, flower bouquets, wholesale to restaurants, and now Grown By supports in-person sales too. Their new app, Grown By Register, you can supercharge your market and farm stand, finally bringing together your online and offline sales and customer data. Grown By is proud to make local food accessible by processing SNAP benefits online and in person right within the app. Grown By helps you put your best food forward. Schedule a demo at coop.grownby.com/no-till. That's coop.grownby.com/no-till. All right, back to the show. A quick and loving reminder that if you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Patrick V, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. After years of mini market gardening in my backyard and some real world experience, I started my first 50 by 100 foot plot on land lended to me by a close friend. I did an initial till with a tractor to break the compaction, and the plot drains better except on the corners where it seems like the sandy soil particles get extra smashed. Is there anything I can do to help prevent erosion of beds as I try to establish/maintain them? Footnote, thoughts on waiting until I get my usual July, August, September drought to see if the extra moisture could maybe help reach a state of equilibrium. I appreciate y'all," end quote. All right, so good stuff. And I guess there are really two questions here. One, how to protect a new garden before it's mulched and or planted. And the second is waiting to see what happens in the summer with the moisture. On the first one, protecting a garden after an initial till, if that's the route you do go, does require some forethought. One, you can cover it with a tarp to deal with weeds and keep the soil in place. Two, you can do that same thing with mulch, which is obviously preferred, but that will depend on the quality of the mulch access and what the mulch is. Or three, get a cover crop or a cash crop in as fast as you can. The latter is probably the hardest because ideally you spend a little time managing the weeds before you plant anything, and that would be both perennial weeds and weeds from seeds. and also building beds before trying to plant, like a cover crop or anything else. Now, on the should I wait and see question, probably yes, it will create some sort of equilibrium, at least a little bit, but I don't think you have to wait per se. In farming, you have to plan around the worst, not the ideal. So in your case, it's not great for growing in those areas at certain times of the year, and that may not change. So what can you do in those corners to improve the drainage, such as raise the beds, higher or change, the direction of the beds, or in emergent situations, maybe you want some sort of French drains or some sort of channels to get the water to drain out of those areas. So it may indeed hit some sort of equilibrium in the summer, which would be nice, but that won't help you in the spring. Now, if you don't need those areas in the spring, then it may not be a big deal. You can just cover crop it over the winter, and that may just suit you fine to just hold it down through that wet spell until things balance out in the summer, and you terminate your cover crop, and then that moisture will come in handy. Good questions, and now we're going to try and squeeze in one more Patreon question just to make sure that we get caught up over there. This one is from Patreon member Patrick Daubert, who writes, quote, "Is there a benefit to having soil electrical conductivity testing done before starting a new farm/market garden? Is there a value for periodic testing? Do you feel it provides a better understanding of the soil properties within a field or across a farm?" End quote. All right, so electrical conductivity testing, or EC, is primarily used as a measurement for salinity, to way oversimplify it, but generally for salinity. And in non-saline soils, it can tell you some other things like how deep the soil is. Soil textures like clays and sands have different ECs, to some extent, and the moisture levels and that sort of stuff. But and this can be important. Like having a high salinity in your soil can restrict soil respiration, microbial activity, nutrient availability, all those things. It's not ideal for growing plants. It's what I'm saying. In general, there is not a lot of need for the average grower to do EC testing. It is not going to tell you much about specific nutrients, but it will tell you if your salinity is too high, in which case you may need to do some sort of leaching with irrigation, or hopefully rain, but probably irrigation. Is it good to do it? I mean, yes, in certain circumstances or in climates, it can be helpful, to explain what may be happening. But in general, a soil test is going to be able to tell you all of those things, plus the nutrient situation, organic matter, all those things. Different types of soil have different EC too, so you can, adjust your nutrient applications based on that. But again, a soil test will do that too. People who grow in containers and grow in high tunnels have a little more need to measure the salts, because without the, natural weathering, they tend to build up even in organic systems in general, because there is a lot of variability based on when you measure EC, and a lot that it does not tell you. I'm not going to recommend the average grower worry about, this sort of test. A soil test will do most of the work for you. Again, if you're a small producer needing to, squeeze every ounce of production out of your space, and you do a lot of tunnel growing, or you're out, where it is in, saltier soils, then you can speak with your agronomist, whoever tests your soil. That's who I'm referring to when I say agronomist, to see if they think it would be a helpful tool for you. So yeah, in general, getting the EC measurement tool and all that is not going to be a necessity for most of us, but I'm open to other POVs on that. So let us know, commenters. Otherwise, let's make like an indoor racket court and squash. Keeping it. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses. Whether you're growing tomatoes for market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a high tunnel protected from the weather provides the right environment for harvest you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality you need to grow productively year-round. The team of experts at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems will be your trusted partners to ensure you get exceptional value from your greenhouse or high tunnel investment. Visit Rimmel.com today to get growing. Today's episode is also brought to you by Good Agriculture. Good Agriculture handles farm bookkeeping and tax filing, so there is no scrambling at tax time. They keep your books clean and up to date and show you where your farm's finances stand. If you're behind, they'll get you caught up. They also help farmers find funding and stay ahead of grant deadlines. You run the farm, they help the business. Learn more at goodagriculture.com/info. That's goodagriculture.com/info. All right, back to the show. All right, so we like to start our squash, Zooks and summer squash, in wind strip trays. These are the cell trays that allow for a little air pruning. They have the little slits on the sides of each of the cells. I choose these for squash over soil blocks only because they do not allow for the roots to mingle quite as easily, and you really have to grow them until the first true leaves start to emerge out of the center of the plant, and then at that point, the roots are strong enough to hold the block together, but not so out of control that they are quite as at risk, because remember, any cucurbit family plants have very sensitive roots. For soil health and preparation, this is a crop that is shallow rooted and loves it some compost. As I often point out, there is a reason that squash in your compost pile rules. So Reserve some decent compost for this crop, and it does indeed grow well in a compost mulch or a compost layer lightly raked or tilthed into the soil. In terms of spacing, I've changed up my plantings on these crops many times over the years, including this year. But in general, I've found that I can stagger 2 rows at 3 feet apart. That's 91 centimeters. In the row, that works pretty well. So it effectively looks like plants every 18 inches, like in a zigzag, sort of staggered. And that would be like 18 inches is 45 centimeters. However, our beds are wider than most at 48 inches. That's 122 centimeters. So if you use the classic 30-inch bed, that's what like most market gardeners use, that's 75 centimeters. 1 row down the middle makes the most sense on squash, typically at closer to 24 inches. So that'd be like 60 centimeters. And I know how much we love when I just list off numbers. But anyway, the idea just being to give them a little shoulder space. You want enough space between the plants that they can kind of, breathe. And that's just for disease as much as anything else. But if it's fertile enough, and you get a decent amount of breeze coming through your farm, like it's not sitting in a valley or anything, and the soil is well draining enough and they get good irrigation, then that spacing will work fine, or a little bit closer to 18 inches. On a totally dry farm, you will need more space. That goes for every crop, but closer to 3 feet apart. That's 91 centimeters with roughly like 5 feet between, rows. So that'd be like 152 centimeters, give or take. Now, pests, make sure your soil is happy and healthy. It starts there. If it's compacted and you have not amended it well, you're just growing pest food. Like pests love them some squash. But also sometimes if the soil is still cool, then pests may find their way to the plants. So for avoiding pest issues, I recommend some row cover or insect netting if you have it going on right when you plant it. That should stay on until they start to flower, at which point they need pollination. That will help with squash bugs and vine borers tremendously. That is the only thing we do for those, and it works great. Also, rotate this crop to avoid breeding those pests and then feeding them. You don't want to do that. Breed them, feed them. Just kind of want the pests to not have so much food. This year, I'm trying to use burlap as my mulch. We've talked about this before. It's this burlap that I have is a little bit thin. I couldn't find the thicker one in the size that I needed, but it is a good crop to mulch as long as the soil is warm enough, meaning I would not use a lightly colored carbonaceous mulch in the spring and then try and plant, squash directly into that. It'd be just because the soil would be too cool and it wouldn't be happy, and it would maybe slow the crop down, which attracts pests. That is partly why I always bring up that soil health will ward off certain pests, but that's not always the case. Healthy soil, when planted at the right temperatures, can make a huge difference in pest and disease issues for sure. But healthy soil that's really cold and planted in, to a warm season crop like squash, well, that may not have the intended effect. So compost mulching may be better in the spring, or cover the lightly covered mulch with a tarp to warm it up a little bit if you did put down like a light straw or hay or something early on, and that will help when you put your squash in. Now, once they start to fruit, you will start picking pretty soon thereafter. I like smaller, waxier looking like baby squash or slightly big baby squash. Once it starts to get any sort of that like matted look, like once it loses its gloss, it's kind of over mature and it becomes meh in flavor. Most chefs and cooks like it tender and young. So again, with squash, that means picking every day and then storing in cooler temperatures for no more than like 5 days, but preferably in venting containers where possible. When you trap all of their moisture completely, it leads to rot pretty fast. So they need some of that breathing room from the ventilation. And that's kind of about it on squashes. Let me know what I missed or what you'd add, especially recipes. Love those. Otherwise, Monday, I think we are done here. Don't forget, No Till Growers is a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That is an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Big thank you to Michelle for all her work. Big thank you to the No Till Growers Board of Directors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of April, which is almost over, you get a shout on the show. So big shout outs today to no new signups or bump ups over the weekend, which is actually, that doesn't happen very often, but all good. Can't win them all. I'm good with that. Love you all. Really appreciate all the support. You are amazing. Anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you later. And by later, I mean Tuesday. Bye. You said we're only getting older and closer